In a rare twist, Ayr outperformed both Prestwick and Troon in April's property market, while some homes across Ayrshire are still struggling to get viewings at all. So what's actually happening? Hi guys, I'm Brian from Be Listed and welcome to your Ayr, Prestwick and Troon property market update for May 2026, covering the KA8, KA9 and KA10 postcode areas. Now this month's update is quite interesting because the market right now is full of contradictions. One property gets multiple offers and sells over the home report value in a matter of days. Another perfectly decent home sits online for weeks with hardly any interest. So if you're a seller, a landlord, a buyer, or an investor trying to understand the market right now, the numbers alone just don't tell the full story anymore. The detail matters. The presentation matters. Pricing matters. And buyer psychology matters more than it has done in quite a few years. So let's break it down properly. So let's start with Ayr, because this month Ayr actually outperformed both Prestwick and Troon in a few key areas. Now traditionally, people often view Troon and Prestwick as the stronger or more aspirational markets. And in many ways they are still very much like that from a pricing perspective. But Ayr's activity levels through April were very, very strong. Buyer demand held up really well. Sales agreed figures looked very healthy, and we're continuing to see good levels of activity for well-positioned homes. Now the key phrase there is well-positioned, because the Ayr market right now is not rewarding lazy pricing. A couple of years ago, sellers could often test the market at ambitious levels because buyers were fighting over very limited stock. Today's buyer behaves differently. They're comparing more properties. They're thinking hard about affordability. Mortgage rates are still influencing their confidence, and buyers are becoming far more selective in what they'll stretch for. But here's the interesting thing. When the right house comes to the market in Ayr, especially family homes with gardens, parking, or walk-in condition, the demand is still very strong. We've seen it ourselves recently. Multiple offers, closing dates, disappointed buyers still actively looking afterwards. That's still happening. The difference is no longer happening for every property automatically. And honestly, I think that's the biggest shift in the market over the last 12 months. The gap between a strong listing and a weak listing is getting wider. So now moving over to Prestwick. Prestwick continues to behave slightly differently from Ayr in a few ways. There's still strong lifestyle element to the market here. People aren't just buying a house in Prestwick, they're buying the cafes, the beachfront, the train links, the schools, the overall lifestyle feel. And because of that, well-presented homes in good pockets of Prestwick still generate really strong emotional buyer reactions. But again, buyers are more selective than they were. The days of throwing almost any property online and expecting a bidding war, almost gone. The homes that are performing the best are the ones where sellers have clearly thought about presentation, photography, pricing strategy, and launch timing. And honestly, I think many sellers are still underestimating how important the online launch has become. Your property is being judged long before someone books a viewing. Comparing instantly, making emotional decisions in seconds, that first impression matters massively now. Another interesting thing is Prestwick is we're seeing demand from relocators, commuters, and buyers moving from larger cities. Prestwick still carries that aspirational coastal town appeal, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. Now let's talk about Troon. Troon remains one of the strongest lifestyle markets in Ayrshire overall, but this is probably the area where buyer expectations are the highest. In other words, buyers paying Troon prices expect Troon quality. And if a property misses the mark on presentation or pricing, buyers become much more cautious. That's particularly true in the mid to upper price brackets. Now, the positive side is that genuinely strong homes in Troon are still attracting excellent interest, especially detached family homes, walk-in condition properties, homes near the seafront, and anything with standout features or views. But again, strategy matters. I keep coming back to that word because it genuinely is the difference maker in this market right now. The sellers getting the best results are usually the ones treating the launch seriously. Good presentation, good visuals, correct pricing, create momentum early. That's what creates competition. So what's the wider Ayrshire picture then? Honestly, I think we're in a much more intelligent market, and I actually mean that positively. The market isn't crashing. Buyers haven't disappeared, but buyers are behaving more rationally again. And I think the wider economy is playing a role in that. Mortgage rates remain one of the biggest talking points. During April, we saw some upward movement in high street mortgage pricing, partly linked to the wider economic uncertainty and global tensions, including the Iran situation. Now, more recently, we're starting to see some lenders ease the rates slightly again, but buyers are clearly watching affordability more carefully than they were a few years ago. At the same time, though, rental demand across Ayrshire remains incredibly strong. We still have tenants reaching out to us daily looking for family homes, 1 and 2 bedroom flats, properties near transport links, homes near schools, homes with parking. Supply is still relatively tight compared with demand. And despite all the headlines about landlords leaving the market, we are still seeing investors actively buying the right opportunities. Some landlords are absolutely selling, that's true, but others are stepping in and expanding portfolios where the numbers still work. And I think that nuance is important. The market headlines often oversimplify things. The reality on the ground is usually more balanced. So what would my advice be right now? For sellers, don't chase yesterday's market, but equally don't panic. Good homes are still selling very well. The key is positioning. Your first 2 weeks online matter massively. That's when your property is freshest. That's when buyers are paying the most attention. And that's when you want maximum momentum. For landlords, this is a good time to reassess strategy properly. Some properties still work brilliantly as long-term rentals. Others might make more sense to sell. Others may suit refurbishment or serviced accommodation. Every situation is different, but demand for rental property across Ayrshire remains very strong overall. And for investors, there are still opportunities out there, but the easy wins are getting fewer. Good investors are becoming more selective too. So overall, what's the key takeaway for May 2026? The Ayrshire market remains active, demand still exists, but strategy is becoming increasingly important. The market is rewarding realistic pricing, good presentation, strong marketing, and proper planning. And honestly, I think the healthier long term for everyone. If you're thinking about selling, letting, investing, or just want an honest conversation about what's happening locally, feel free to reach out. You can also read the full written Ayr, Prestwick and Troon property market update on our website. I'm Brian McLemon from Be Listed. Really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for watching.